Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eirik, welcome to my studio and to my YouTube channel. You are watching an excerpt, a short section of my Patreon exclusive series, available to my patrons who support me with $5 or more. The full-length video is over 45 minutes long and full of valuable information. To see the full episode, you have to go on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Eirik Arnesen. There's a link in the description below. You have to be a Patreon supporter of $5 or more in order to see the videos. Once you become a supporter, you will instantly have access to all the videos. You will find the videos by clicking the post button here. The videos should appear if you have pledged $5 or more. And you can refine your search if you're looking for a specific video at the top of the page here. For now, however, sit back, relax, enjoy some royalty-free music and me sculpting the contours of my half-life size sculpture. First, let's quickly outline what I plan to talk about in this episode. We will discuss some simple rules you can follow to make sure you maintain structure. We will talk about how to deal with complex contours, different ways of dealing with contours, which in turn leaves different looks, and we'll discuss how contours affect internal information from the next view and how we can string our 4 views together to get a sculpture that connects properly. There will probably end up being more as well, but this is the basic outline for what I hope to cover and show you in this episode. And perhaps some of it will be shown in the next episode as well, we'll see. To begin, we don't have much, only our box and egg with a little material connecting the two. There's no reason not to fill this gap in between them, as I have, because there will need to be clay there anyways. Low-risk maneuvers is something that I'm always interested in making. For me, a low-risk maneuver means putting clay somewhere where it definitely can't hurt, and there needs to be clay put at some point anyways. It's in the high-risk areas where I build contours in a more conservative fashion. I'm not considering volume at this stage at all, by the way. That comes later, way later. Remember from episode 1 where we discussed reference and how to observe, and this applies whether you work from life or from photographs. We only use 4 views to observe the body, so when talking about contours, I'm talking about the outline of the figure from those 4 views. The 4 views are the front, the sides, and the back. There's no need for any other views, and definitely little use for views from above or below if we have some base understanding of our subject. This base understanding is best achieved not by starting out with a ton of reference from all sorts of obscure angles, but attempting to sculpt from the 4 views, front, sides, and back, and filling in the areas where the understanding of the subject is lacking with more reference later. Eventually, you'll build up an understanding of the human body and how it works, and you'll be able to solve some of the issues you ran into before without requiring additional reference. The reason I'm calling it contours is important actually. I've received several messages before asking what I mean when talking about contours. Asking if I mean the silhouette, for example. The reason I use contours is because the word contours best describes what I'm after here. I'm after more than the silhouette. The outline of my figure exists from one view, but it also exists from other views. In other words, I need to not only build my sculpture's outline, but I need to understand how the outline from one view is going to translate into internal information in the next view. Each of the 4 views needs to be considered in this way, and in doing so I will begin to develop not only the outline, but also the internal information. By internal information, I mean everything that happens in between the contours of my figure. You'll see me taking this into consideration right from the beginning. Notice how I add the clay on the obliques right above the box. It is added with direction, it's not vertical, it's not up and down. The same for the bottom of the ribcage. Those pieces of clay have an angle to them. And that angle corresponds with how the contours should move. You can see this because the camera is placed slightly from the side, of course. I struggle to see this because I'm simply observing from the front. This is why, especially if you are a beginner, that you should take your time while building up your contours and rotate your subject and sculpture every 25 minutes. Because the direction of your contour in depth can never be observed easily head-on. But once we move on to the next view, the side view, we can begin to observe where the contour moves because now depth has become left and right. A good tip in general, and something I try to abide by still, is that I never trust an observation of depth. I can only trust observations of left and right and up and down. In order to observe what is depth from one view, I need to turn my subject and sculpture and observe them from the next view, turning depth into left and right. Let's thank today's sponsors, my Patreon supporters on Patreon, who have ensured the continued existence of this channel and allowed me to upgrade my gear bit by bit, making better looking and better sounding content for all of you watching. If you like what I'm doing here and are interested in supporting the channel, or perhaps interested in getting personal feedback on your sculptures from me, then Patreon is the place for you. You will get in-depth feedback on techniques and how you can apply them to your own work. Anything sculpture related goes. We can talk about armatures, supplies, mold making, anything you need help with in your sculpting attempts. So check it out, there's a link in the description below. If I fail to set up the movement of my contour in depth and I reach my overall widths, it is going to be very difficult to fix. A lot of backtracking will be needed. Imagine, for example, that the contour of the ribcage traveled vertically up and down the side of our figure. We will get a problem fitting all the information we need to fit in there. For example, our ribs and serratus muscles would become distorted, appearing from the front view to be too long at the bottom and too short at the top. Placing the armpit would be a pain, and the distance from armpit to pectoral muscle would become an issue as the contour of the ribcage should end behind the armpit. So there is a plethora of issues that can arise and derail us seriously if we do not place our contours in space well. When I use in space, I'm talking about 3 dimensions, so placing something well in space means placing it well left, right, up and down, and in depth. With experience comes the ability to anticipate where the contours need to travel. Pencil drawing can help with this a lot, as the direction of the contours can only be observed from one view while drawing. You're obviously sitting down or standing up in the same place drawing. You're not moving around your subject while you're drawing necessarily. And the contours needs to be translated onto the drawing in some sort of fashion, and very often this is done in pencil drawing with overlapping lines describing what forms travel or sit in front of others. It's not that it's impossible to observe how contours travel in depth, but it can be very difficult to gauge with any degree of accuracy. In pencil drawing, this is fine, as a simple overlap will describe what we're after. A more sensitive or highly skilled draftsman might be able to discern to a higher degree how the contour travels and describe and vary this using line weight, for example. But with sculpture, we need to be specific because we are attempting to ascribe the figure in 360 degrees and we cannot rely on illusions. We actually have to make the damn thing. Let's take a quick second to talk about some updates that's been made to my Patreon page. I've just started putting out exclusive Patreon content. You're watching an excerpt of one right now. Videos that you will only have access to if you are a supporter on Patreon. The first series we are embarking on is the Beginner's Guide to Figure Sculpture. We will cover how to sculpt a standing nude female figure in contrapposto in half-life size scale. I will cover everything you need to know from the armature, the sculpting, and eventually the mold making. This will be the one-stop for all the answers you'll need for sculpting a standing nude figure, whether you sculpt from life or from photo reference. We will cover how to work from both. One video will be released on the first Thursday of every month. The video will be longer than what you're used to seeing here on YouTube, around 35 to 45 minutes long. It will all be real-time footage, no time lapses, and I will do my best to use a very linear process with clearly defined steps, making it both easy to follow and easier to do on your own. Any patron pledging $5 or more will get access to the videos. I'm excited to finally be putting out exclusive Patreon content for my patrons, whose support is greatly appreciated. So check out my Patreon page and watch the full video by clicking the link in the description below. So you'll see me make anticipatory clay marks all over the place while placing my contours without needing to observe from a different view. A simple post like this will have repeating patterns from model to model that we can learn and use to speed up the process. Now, will my first guess be right? Very likely not, but it will not be wrong, meaning that I'll be heading in the right direction, and as long as I underbuild, I will have the opportunity later to make better observed decisions. The idea being that if I stray too far from what my model gives me, my sculpture will no longer resemble the model and corrections become hard to make. It's a strange thing to wrap your head around, but if your sculpture strays too far from the model, it becomes difficult to compare the two, because they don't look anything alike. But if you get too close to the model with too many mistakes, it becomes difficult to find what's wrong because everything will be just a little wrong. And all these little wrongs adds up into something that's very wrong. So the best approach is to head in the direction of making your sculpture look like the model, but slowly approaching it, fixing your mistakes as you go. Notice where I begin to sculpt as well. I begin around the core of my sculpture, the first decision that we made, which was the box. Our model's pelvis and our sculpture's abstracted pelvis. There are several reasons for this. One is that from the two aces points, the outside top front corners of our box, there is a very short distance to the outside contours of our model. I wish I could show you this, but YouTube didn't like it last time I did. But you can look up one of the previous videos, or I can post images on the Patreon page. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do that. Because the distance between the corners of our box and the outside contours of our figure in that very area is very short, it's a lot easier to judge. Shorter distances are easier to judge. You can guess the length of a car, for example, a lot easier than you can guess the length of a cruise ship. And this holds true within our sculpture as well. And so this means that starting around the box, it's the safest area to begin in. You'll also notice throughout the video that I never jump across a gap of armature. I won't sculpt the foot before the leg or the hand before the arm. In general, I'll grow outwards from the core of my sculpture. This is another technique to avoid losing control of your sculpture. Everything needs to connect properly in order for our piece to appear solid, and if we begin sculpting elements out in the air, we can't make educated decisions if they will connect well with whatever they need to connect to on the inside. So everything grows out of something else. One decision is based upon the decision that came before it. My first decision was the box, so it makes sense to let everything grow outwards from the first decision and build upon that. If you enjoyed the video and want to learn sculpture, check out my Patreon page. I give feedback and critiques on people's work, and we can talk about whatever you need help with in your sculpting endeavors. And right now there is exclusive sculpting content on my Patreon. The first series, which you are watching right now, is the Beginner's Guide to Figure Sculpture. I'm super excited to finally be creating exclusive content for Patreon, and I hope you will be too, and we'll take a look. The link to my Patreon is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for a new video next Thursday. Hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button and share with your friends and family. It helps me out a lot. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and I hope to see you in the next one.